Today we're going to speak of revision in relation to prosperity. We may have within us on this journey to bringing forth our success as far as prosperity goes, opportunities, many opportunities to release from certain assumptions, beliefs in relation to stress, unnecessary complexity and frustration when it comes to bringing forth our success, lack of deservedness, I would say, which also, like stress, are interpretations that we have accumulated, stored within the subconscious based on past experiences. The same is to be said on knowingness, or I would like to look at it from the perspective of failing to recognize knowingness in relation to what to do, what to say, when to act, and when not to act. As far as action goes, what we're really looking for is effortless flow in relation to prosperity. Every day we have opportunities. Opportunities present themselves, and they are revealed, as we discussed in the last video, when we spoke of emotional intelligence, in the form of reactivity, tension, and inner resistance. We're looking at it from the perspective as these areas are opportunities. And while they may be unpleasant as far as experience go, they provide grounds for reflection. What are we imagining? Working with the power of imagination, we have the ability to revise how we relate to the day-to-day experiences so that we can relate to the day-to-day experiences, people, environment, circumstance, information, from the perspective of ideal harmony, flow, love in relation to our vision. That's what we're going to further discuss in today's topic regarding prosperity. Neville Goddard states, "I believe any man who has been successful in his life, venture has lived as though he were successful. Living in that state, he can name those who aided him in achieving his success. And he may deny that he was always aware of success, but his awareness compelled the aid he received." So we're talking about prosperity consciousness. An individual who has identified with prosperity consciousness in an earlier stage of their life will tend to navigate and live from that perspective of that consciousness. Some might not have had the opportunity to have their subconscious impressed with prosperity-based information or conversations surrounding prosperity from a place of empowerment. For whatever the reason may be, it was not there. However, here we are right now in the eternal now, where all possibility, all potentiality, all probability, and all of reality exists. We seem to move down this space of past, present, and future and forget that the opportunity is now. And the opportunity presents itself all day long in the now. And it's revealing what is the identification, what we are saying I am too. And it is revealed via our tension, our reactivity, and our inner resistance. So one of the exercises that he gives, and one of his core contributions, is the process of revision. When we speak of those that have prosperity consciousness, it is important to recognize that that's a state of being that is obvious to them. So thus, they don't stress about how the prosperity is going to be brought forth. They understand, they know. They have a deep connectedness with their vision and a realization. We call this confidence. There's no question about deservedness or knowingness, knowing what to do, when to do, why to do, when to act, when not to act. Intuition. That's automatic when a person is deeply identified with a prosperity state of mind. Now, if we don't have that, or we have challenges with this, we have the ability to further affirm that ideal state of mind of prosperity-based state of mind, through the process of revision, which is essentially keeping the garden of the mind, as he has referred to many times in his discussions. And he states, "And now you have a mission. You have a purpose in life. It's a noble purpose, because you have been selected to really become the chief gardener in the garden of God. And in the garden you must have pruning shears. And pruning shears is revision. You simply revise. As you revise the day, you repeal the day. For the day is not slipping into the past. It does not recede as people think. It is always advancing into the future to confront you, either pruned or in some strange weed-like state. So the tension and reactivity is revealing our state of mind. It is revealing our interpretations, our beliefs. For some of us, we seem to revert back to certain states of mind, certain beliefs. And a lot of times we may shame ourselves in relation to that particular belief. What we want to understand is we are transcendent to that belief. We are consciously or subconsciously identifying with the belief. And just as we have the power to consciously or subconsciously identify with the belief of limitation, of inner resistance-based interpretation to whatever it is we're experiencing, people, environment, circumstance, information, on the day-to-day journey to bringing forth prosperity. Just as we have the power to identify with it, we also have the power not to identify with it, discovered through working with revision. So we're going to actually go through it. And this conversation came as a result of some reflections on consulting. So after I transitioned out of my IT business in 2013, I got involved with a number of consulting projects, took on a number of consulting clients. And since 2019, I have been doing about 2 to 3, sometimes 4 consulting calls a day, 5 days a week, although now I've switched it to 2 so that I could pursue some other activities. And I took on that opportunity, and I brought forth a lot of understanding of what we really do as consultants. And one of the key factors is to be able to look at how a person interprets their past and guide them through the process of reinterpretation. So they receive a rejection in selling and they feel that they are not deserved or not good enough. We help them go back to that particular experience that they had in which they formed that identification and change that relationship. We call that revision. A person does not believe that they can bring forth the business success because of X, Y, Z condition in their life. We go back to where they had initially formed this identification, and we help them see it from a different perspective. They identify with that perspective, and now they're able to move forward in the current opportunities that they have. Perhaps they had a challenging experience with one of their team members the week prior, and it brought forth a lot of tension, uncertainty. We help them go back to that experience in their mind's eye and see it differently from the perspective of opportunity. Through the dialogue and conversation and working with the emotional intelligence components, which we talked about in the last video, which I recommend you watch, we're able to understand feel, felt, found. We brought this up a few videos ago, and relate it to our own experiences and help them transcend into the prosperity state of mind to a deeper degree. Then they identify with that state of mind and they move forward towards that level of prosperity that they desire. Many different ways of working with revision. However, the bottom line remains the same. We're changing our relationship with our past in relationship to the now, the eternal now. So he states, if you hear something that is unlovely, don't accept it, but instantly revise it. Hear the words that ought to have been spoken, and persuade yourself to the best of your ability that it is so. Now, this is a practice, and I recommend this practice be a daily occurrence. So beyond practice, it becomes a way of life. Although we are not taught this way of life formally, we are now being introduced to this way of life, and certainly we've been discussing it all throughout the videos, and we want to make this a normal way of being. Thus, when a person experiences some kind of reactivity or tension, they first see it as an opportunity to understand what meaning they are associating, and to be able to imagine it to happen differently, to the point where they feel that they are now in that state of mind that is reflective of the vision. For example, say a person is moving in the journey to bringing forth success in the entrepreneurial space. They feel that they do not have the resources to bring forth their vision. Maybe they don't have the technology. They start to get reactive because they don't have a technological background. Or maybe they don't see themselves as an effective communicator and don't see themselves as the kind of person that can pull together a team of relationships to work with those resources, to translate that into an entrepreneurial venture. They go back to the recognition that this was a story that they've been telling themselves from past experiences. They feel this reactivity to bringing forth their vision as a result of these interpretations. They can go back to that particular circumstance in their imagination in which they're recalling from their past and imagine it to happen a different way. Maybe it was a conversation with somebody that then said, one day you are going to develop the ability to bring forth a higher degree of congruence in your communication, which is going to translate to the ability to pull people together from the most unexpected places. They're just going to show up, and resources are going to reveal themselves. And as a result of working with these relationships and resources, you're going to build a very successful business, and it's going to help the lives of many. Now, in their imagination, this happened with such conviction in the form of something like the Invisible Council, as discussed in Think and Grow Rich, in which Napoleon Hill would hold these meetings in his mind's eye at the end of the night before going to sleep, where he would have figures that he admired, who had attributes that he desired to integrate in himself. And through these conversations, he found himself embodying those attributes. That's the powerful act of revision in relationship to the different experiences that we have each day, knowing that imagination is what is shaping what we are about to experience. So we can reimagine how it occurred. And this is one of the ways that I just mentioned that I do it, is I see myself, higher self, having a conversation with my past self that was having an experience, that was forming certain conclusions about how reality works, which is bringing forth tension and reactivity in the now. And he says, now here's how we do it. At the end of my day, I review the day. I don't judge it. I simply review it. I look over the entire day, all the episodes, all the events, all the conversations, all the meetings, and then I see it clearly in my mind's eye. I rewrite it. Now, he mentions this as a process that we could do at the end of the night, which is in relation to state akin to sleep, theta, so that we can bypass the overcritical, overly active, conscious beta states and go straight into a theta state in which the subconscious is more receptive, and we can imagine lucidly the scenes playing out in an ideal way, thus impressing the subconscious and changing our relationship to those attributes, and we experience it the next day. He also speaks about it doing it real time, as he states here. If you hear something that is unlovely, don't accept it, but instantly revise it. I recommend a combination of both. Personally, I like the real-time approach because on the day-to-day experience, tension and reactivity could show up at any moment. Could be during a business deal, during a sales call, during a difficult conversation or a perceived difficult conversation with a team member or a vendor or a client. And if in that moment we can recognize that the tension and reactivity is conjuring up in our imagination something from the past, we can develop a higher degree of awareness to rise above it in that moment and change our relationship to that particular experience. In sales, we call this overcoming objection. Well, we can overcome our own objections in our mind. And although this might be considered an advanced skill, if we practice this, we will eventually make this advanced skill a way of life, like breathing air. As mentioned, this is not something that we are taught. And upon my own experience, when I look back on my journey, I would practice the revision, although I didn't call it revision. I called it something else because I had learned it from other authors. A lot of my NLP studies took me into these understandings. And I didn't have, at that particular point, the ability to do it real time. So I would do it at the end of the day, which is why he recommends it. But then, after practicing it by doing it real time, in the moment, while I'm interacting with people, I actually found that it became a way of being. And simply, we can do this to a higher degree by practicing presence, which we talked about in the last video, one of the core attributes for developing a higher degree of emotional intelligence. So practicing presence, being in the now, is something that may be considered abstract. However, we have the power to do this every day by recognizing if we're really valuing each opportunity and each moment that we have. Simply put, are we deeply engaged in what we're doing? When we're having conversations with people, is our mind wandering onto something else, or are we deeply engaged in the interaction? When a person is deeply engaged in the interaction, they can feel the tension and reactivity. When they feel the tension and reactivity, they can also develop a understanding real time in the moment to identify what that tension and reactivity is recalling, and to be able to change that relationship right then and there. Perhaps a person receives a rejection from a prospect. Real time, they recognize that the rejection is really an objection of how the prospect really does want to do business with them. However, they're not communicating in a way that resonates, more accurately put, revealing the actual benefit that the prospect will receive as a result of working with them or receiving the product or service. They recognize that in the moment because they knew that in the past they took rejection as they're not good enough. Now they're looking at it as optimization data. They then realize that this is actually what's going on. And then all of a sudden, they seem to come up with the right response. Quick wits, we call this. Quick response. And now they are presenting themselves as an effective communicator. They then realize, upon retrospect of that experience, as they evaluate that at the end of the night, that this effective communicator was always inside of them. And all they had to do was practice this art of revision, real time, so that it would become a habit, and they would be able to do it again and again and again. We can work with revision real time, and we can work with it at the end of the night. He says, I rewrite it, and I make it conform to the ideal day I wish I had experienced. I take scene after scene and rewrite it, revise it, and having revised my day, then in my imagination I relive that day, the revised day, and I do it over and over in my imagination until this seemingly imagined state begins to take on to me the tones of reality. So he is identifying with that state in his imagination. We're imagining all the time, although the imagination could be happening so fast that we're not recognizing that we're imagining. And so we say what we think, or how we feel, or how we emotionally integrate, or how we react. These are clues of what we are imagining. And so at the end of the night, we can go back to these experiences that we had during the day in which we had this tension and reactivity and experience with the other individual or the circumstance or the environment and imagined it to happen in an ideal way, playing it over and over again in a way that if you saw that person or experienced the circumstance the next day or the environment or the information, you would not feel that same interpretation. The interpretations in relation to prosperity we find in consulting is usually related to lack of self-confidence. And it's not that the person does not have the self-confidence, is that they are not allowing the subconscious to express the self-confidence, the authentic self-confidence that is there, that was always there. But instead they were identifying with the reactivity or tension and going into different states of mind, preventing their own self-confidence from expressing. And so that's how I recommend working with imagination in terms of self-confidence. Perhaps the self-confidence formula by Napoleon Hill can help you with that. I'll put a link in the description. I've done a video discussion on that. He says, it seems that it's real, that I actually did experience it. And I have found from experience that these revised days, if really live, will change my tomorrows. When I meet people tomorrow that today disappointed me, they will not tomorrow. For in me I have changed the very nature of that being. And having changed him, he bears witness tomorrow of the change that took place within me. So when we look at all the different aspects that are in play, that externalize as a result of the belief, it can be overwhelming. So we practice the simplicity of the process and work with imagination. As he had identified, that imagination is the causative of what appears in the five sensory experience, either through conscious imagination or reimagining the past unconsciously based on past experiences. However, all the power is in the now. The power is now. We can only give the power to the past by reimagining the past from disempowerment, or imagine the future from disempowerment, thus give the power to the future, when in actuality, we want to recognize that the power is in now. We change how we relate to the future. We change the future in the eternal now because all of it happens in the eternal now. And this is essentially tending to the garden. As he states, it is my duty to take this garden and really make it a garden by daily using the pruning shears of revision. So again, upon reflection, I realized that as a consultant, as a team member, a vendor, a service provider, and if you're a parent, brother, sister, mother, father, friend, every day we are presented with opportunities when it comes to how we relate to people. People recall through our interactions with them what we are imagining, and a lot of times we relate it to our past when it comes to prosperity in the form of certain imaginal scenes that are spawned and revealed by our tension and our reactivity and our inner resistance in the eternal now. If we can identify this real time in the moment, this is enormously powerful. And we all have the ability to do this. Certainly I didn't believe that I had the ability to do this back in the days. But what I've noticed is that I have the ability to do this right now. And I'm getting better at this each day. And the way to get better at, and the way that I've been working with everybody in my consulting to get better at, is the conscious practice of this. Like with anything, you get better at it with practice. So what I recommend is to practice this today, practice this tomorrow, practice this every day until it becomes a way of life. And the practice is simply meditated upon this particular quote, and then we'll dimensionalize it. As now you have a mission, you have a purpose in life. It's a noble purpose because you have been selected to really become the chief gardener in the garden of God. And in the garden, you must have pruning shears. And pruning shears is revision. You simply revise. And as you revise the day, you repeal the day. For the day is not slipping into the past. It does not recede as people think. It is always advancing into the future to confront you, either pruned or in some strange weed-like state. The beautiful thing is that we're guided by how we feel, the emotional integration, the tension, the inner resistance, the reactivity is guiding us towards our prosperity. That's how we want to see it. We don't want to fear it. We don't want to run away from it. We don't want to shame ourselves because we experience it. We want to understand it. And the way we want to understand it is in contribution. So as I stated in my video, see it in contribution and in harmony with your vision. How so? It's bringing up what we are imagining. And we can imagine differently. And we know we have applied the process of revision, which we all have the power to do, more effectively when in those circumstances again, we don't find ourselves tense or reactive or unnecessarily immobilized with overthinking, which are symptoms of not being present, as we discussed in the last video, and more of an opportunity to practice revision. So again, revision is exercising our imagination to reimagine the experience that played out during the day, which brought forth unnecessary tension, reactivity, and inner resistance in an ideal way, be it an interaction with a person, be it an experience with an environment. Imagine it to have happened in the ideal way. And as mentioned, we have the power to do this real time, while in conversation, while we are doing anything on the day-to-day journey. All of these are opportunities. So let's conclude this with an affirmation to emphasize revision. You can say, I realize that I have the ability to review and not judge the aspects that show up on the day-to-day journey, revealing what's within consciousness. As a result, I'm able to modify, adjust, and reimagine from a perspective of prosperity. I realize that prosperity is who I am. I live in and from prosperity more so each day as I find the opportunities via tension, reactivity, and inner resistance to revise and live in the spirit of harmony with all in relation to bringing forth the prosperity that I desire. If you want to copy this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.